events happened in the last week of June 2023 that are of immense significance to India meeting its net zero commitments. On June 26, the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change brought in Draft Green Credit Program Implementation Rules 2023. And 2 days later, on June 28, the Ministry of Power notified the Carbon Credit Trading Scheme 2023. The Green Credit Program implementation rules are at the draft stage and have been put up for public comments. But the Carbon Credit Trading Scheme has been brought into force. Now let us take a close look at what these two are. But before we do that, let us understand what carbon credits are very briefly here. We have already done one video exclusively on carbon markets, the link to which is given in the description below. Please check it out. However, let us quickly recapitulate what carbon credit and carbon market is all about. By the way, carbon credits are also sometimes called carbon offsets. Part A will be a backgrounder about carbon credits and carbon markets. Part B will be all about the two important notifications of Government of India. Now, what are carbon credits? What is a carbon market? If you do some activity that has the effect of reducing emissions of a greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide below a certain benchmark, you get a carbon credit. Also, if you do some activity that has the effect of sucking up a greenhouse gas like the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, you get a carbon credit. One carbon credit corresponds to 1 ton of carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent emission, either reduced or removed. These carbon credits are tradable in the market like the shares of a company. These credits are bought by an entity that is under obligation, under a legal obligation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but is unable to do so on its own by other measures, or by an entity that has voluntarily committed itself to reducing emissions. So, with there being an instrument called carbon credit and there being sellers and buyers, you have a market, and this market is called the carbon market. Carbon trading is nothing new. It was first introduced under the Kyoto Protocol, which came into force on February 16, 2005. Those who reduced emissions or removed carbon dioxide or any other greenhouse gas from the atmosphere were given certified emission reduction certificates or CERs, which they could sell in the market. This was happening for a number of years. But then the prices of these CERs crashed and many Indian companies are still left holding heaps of worthless CERs. Today there are many carbon markets in the world. Some are global, some are regional. They broadly divide into two types, the voluntary market and the compliance market. Now, voluntary and compliance are two important terms in carbon market vocabulary, and it would be very useful to commit them to memory. Voluntary market is one in which the buyers are not under any legal obligation to do emission reductions, but have voluntarily, that is on their own, come forward to doing so, even if it costs them some money for the good of the world. Many leading companies of the world, such as Google, Microsoft, Apple, Shell, there are many companies who are buyers in the voluntary market. According to one estimate, the size of the voluntary carbon market was 2 billion in 2020, but many experts have said it could go up to anywhere between $5 billion, $30 billion, or even up to $50 billion by 2030, depending upon the market price of the carbon credit. Now, coming to compliance market. Compliance market is one in which the buyers of the credit are under an obligation by law or obligated by law to do emission reductions. The compliance market is typically run by what is called a cap and trade mechanism. Cap and trade is another important term in carbon lingo. Under this, the authority fixes a baseline for emissions or allows a certain level of emissions. For example, for the steel industry, it could be so many tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel produced. For coal power industry, it could be so many tons of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour of power produced. An obligated entity is bound by law to limit its emissions to the level fixed by the authority. If its emissions are lesser than the fixed level, it gets carbon credits. If emissions exceed the fixed level, then no problem. It can go to the market and buy carbon credits that are sold by those companies or those entities that have done well for themselves. This cap and trade market is sometimes called the allowance market. The carbon credits in the allowance market are simply called allowances. Now, let us see what the two June 2023 notifications of the Government of India actually say. Now, let us look at the second of the two notifications, namely the one that brings in Carbon Credit Trading Scheme 2023. For quite some time now, the Government of India has been wanting to bring in an Indian carbon market, a market in which carbon credits are generated in India, sold in India, and bought by entities in India. The notification of the Ministry of Power dated June 28, 2023 is the first step in making the Indian carbon market a reality. As per this scheme, the Indian carbon market will be run by the cap and trade mechanism which I just described. Now let us take a close look at some of the salient features of this scheme. The Ministry of Power will name the sectors and the obligated entities, fix emission intensity targets, and then hand it over to the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change for notification. In naming the sectors, obligated entities and fixing emission targets, the Ministry of Power will go by the recommendations of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, BEE. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency will be the administrator of the scheme, and it will be the authority that issues carbon credits. It will also accredit verifying agencies. The Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, or the CERC, will be the regulator for the trading part of carbon credits. The Grid Controller of India Limited will maintain a meta register of all obligated entities and also record all trading transactions in that register. A National Steering Committee will be set up. Now, this steering committee will comprise secretaries of Ministries of Power and Minister of Environment and joint secretaries and expert members from outside, Central Electricity Authority, CERC, the Grid Controller of India, so on and so forth. It's a big committee. It's a very technical committee. This National Steering Committee will essentially assist the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which, as I said, will be the administrator of this scheme to implement this scheme. So, the Power Ministry's notification, basically what it does is, it describes the framework under which the Indian carbon market will operate. Of course, lots of things need to be done. Still, the next steps will be of naming the sectors and then naming the individual companies, individual entities within those sectors, and fixing emission reduction targets and framing rules for carbon markets, and then verifications. Now, who will do the verification? Actually, if these companies come and claim I have done this much of emissions, somebody will have to verify that. So, the naming, identifying, accrediting those verifications, all these things will have to happen from now, and then you will have a carbon market. That is about the first notification. Now, let us look at the second notification, the other notification, which is called Draft Green Credits Program Implementation Rules 2023. Green credits are also like carbon credits, but only they are not limited to greenhouse gas emission reduction or removal. They are credits given for a range of other activities. The draft rules name 8 such activities. They are tree plantation, water, sustainable agriculture, waste management, air pollution reduction, mangrove conservation, ecomark labeling for goods and services, and building sustainable buildings. The green credits are fungible across these activities, which means that if you earn the green credits through one of these activities, the credits can be bought by someone else who is engaged in another of these activities. Unlike the carbon credits trading scheme, the green credits program will be purely voluntary. That means there will not be any obligated entities. There will be nobody obliged by law. The Indian Council for Forestry Research and Education will be the administrator of this program. The draft rules speak about creating a green credits registry, accrediting green credits verifiers, trading platforms, and so on and so forth. Now, with these two notifications, that is on carbon credits and the broader green credits, India has taken a decisive step towards creating a market mechanism for meeting its net zero commitments. For more videos on India's green transition journey,